and welcome to another exciting show. And tonight, our guest is Dr. Sarah Myhill, one of the most qualified guests I think we've ever had. Welcome to the show, Dr. Myhill.
Thank you. You're
And
very kind.
a quick brief bio. Dr. Myhill qualified in 1981 and worked in the NHS for 20 years and is a clinical director of the College of Naturopathic Medicine, 1984 Diploma of Clinical Nutrition, medical director of UK Medical Freedom Alliance, patron of Association of Naturopathic Practitioners, honorary diploma of Naturopathic Medicine 2022, and is a specialist interest in chronic fatigue syndrome and ME, and has written several books and on it, and speaks the same language because he's into natural medicine. And between you and I wouldn't touch the NHS with a 10-foot sterilised barge pole unless you're run over by a bus or something and you've got no choice. But welcome to the show. And I can, by the way, before we go any further, I can fully recommend the iodine. It's very, very good. But no, actually, it's excellent because it's 15%, which I got from Dr. Myhill. So I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly.
Perfect.
Okay. And it's 15%, and wherever you go, it's 4 or 5%. So. And it's easy on the old purse as well. It's not expensive. It's very reasonable. So over to you. I was talking about a keto diet, which I'm on, which I've been on for over a year. And so far away, whatever direction we wish to go.
Okay.
You can see the chat coming down the side there. So there we go.
Well, of course, the difference between the medicine that I practice and the medicine that the NHS and the rest of the world practice is I'm interested in mechanisms. I'm interested in asking the question, why? Why do people have fatigue? Why do they have migraine? Why do they have arthritis? Or why do they have heart disease? Because if you know what the mechanism is, then you know how to treat it. And the reason why the ketogenic diet is so important is because it impacts on the two main drivers of Western pathology. The first is poor energy delivery mechanisms. So much pathology is driven by poor energy delivery mechanisms at the cellular level. And of course, the obvious example of that is chronic fatigue syndrome. And the second reason is inflammation. So much pathology is driven by inflammation. And the point about ketones and being on a ketogenic diet is ketones is the preferred fuel for the engines of our bodies, which are called mitochondria. Mitochondria, which take fuel from the bloodstream, burn that fuel in the presence of oxygen to generate energy. Their preferred fuel is ketones. That's why the ketogenic diet is so important. And secondly, ketones have a marked anti-inflammatory effect on the body. So whatever the cause of the inflammation is, whether it's allergy, autoimmunity, chronic infection, it doesn't matter. Ketones help to damp that down. So that is why that is the starting point. And of course, when anybody asks me, well, what is the correct diet? Always go back to evolutionary biology, because we evolved over hundreds of thousands, nay, millions of years, eating a particular diet. And that diet is the paleo ketogenic diet. Paleo, because there are virtually no gluten grains. That only came maybe 10,000 years ago, which from an evolutionary perspective is a blink of an eye. No dairy products, because again, they're recently introduced to the human diet. And humans evolved largely as carnivores. And a carnivore diet, meat, fish, eggs heavy, is a ketogenic diet. It's a highly nutritious diet. It's a low toxic diet. It doesn't lend itself to what I call the upper fermenting gut. So problems came along when carbohydrates started creeping into our diet. And guess who had the carbohydrates? Let's look at the Egyptians. The slaves had the carbohydrates, didn't they? It was cheap food for the peasants. So the peasants could work hard and and perform for the aristocracy, because the aristocracy, they lived on meat. I've just read a biography of the medieval court, Henry VIII. Guess what they lived on? Venison, swan, beef, pork. That's what they
Mm.
lived on. Whereas the poor peasants had to survive on porridge and raw and grits. Pretty
Gruel.
fancy bread.
Mm.
So the point is here is the ketogenic diet, which is meat heavy, is the evolutionary correct diet for so many reasons. And that is the starting point to prevent and treat so much pathology. So I'm so pleased to hear that you are consuming a ketogenic diet. That's a great step forward. And anybody listening to this should really consider that seriously.
Never felt better. Seriously. And I'll tell you something else. I mean, obviously, I'm not a doctor, I'm far from it. But I believe, you can correct me on this, your gut is your second brain, so they
Absolutely.
say. And
Absolutely.
I used to suffer badly with nerves and things, and that's improved. It
Correct, because
it's
if you're
gone.
if
Yeah,
you're if you're consuming a diet
yeah,
that's got sugars and carbohydrates in there, what happens if for breakfast you have your toast, your cereals, your fruit juice, your sweet tea, is your blood sugar shoots up.
it does.
Now that is very addictive. People love to get that sugar hit, but the problem with that is, as sugar is terribly damaging to arteries, it feeds cancer cells, it's damaging to the brain. The body doesn't like it. So there's an outpouring of insulin, and insulin brings the blood sugar down by shunting into fat. But as the blood sugar comes down, the brain panics. It thinks it's running out of fuel, so it pours out the stress hormone, which is adrenaline. And adrenaline, that's what makes us anxious, shaky, jittery, nervous, and makes us feel stressed. And how do we deal with stress in the modern world? We use addiction, which might be sugar, it might be caffeine, it might be fags, it might be booze or whatever.
Mm,
But as soon as you get off that blood sugar roller coaster, when you're spiking insulin and you're spiking adrenaline, all your hormones, pan out, and life becomes a much smoother ride. I mean, people talk about obesity as if it occurs because people overeat, but it's all about insulin. And if you can stop eating foods that spike insulin, and instead they spike the satiety hormones, the hormones like leptin and ghrelin that make you feel full, that make you feel satisfied, then you stop thinking about food all the time. You're
mm,
not hungry. You can
that's
start
right.
thinking about, oh, what, I must be doing this, I should be doing that. So, diet is absolutely the starting point to tackle everything. And it's only by actually doing it yourself that you appreciate the benefits of it. And getting off
Mm.
that sugar roller coaster is the starting point.
Oh, it is. But Aunt Sally has come up with a very good one here. She said, "Is there a risk of gallstones with a ketogenic diet? I know someone in their 30s who has always eaten keto and now has gallstones."
Well, that is very, very unusual, because gallstones are considered to be a part of sugar and carbohydrate based diet. Because essentially, bile is a fatty liquid. That's where we
Mm,
excrete fats, which are full of laden with fat soluble toxins, and that helps with the digestion of fat. But if you don't have enough fat in your diet, then gallstones will precipitate out. So that's a very unusual history, and I would want to know more. I mean, to have gallstones in your 30s, again, is very unusual.
mm.
But it begs the question, it says always eating keto, but does that date from childhood? Because most children these days eat carbohydrate high diets. In fact, recently I attended the Public Health Collaboration Conference in Birmingham, and David Unwin, diabetes expert, was speaking. He points out that children, they now get 75% of their calories from ultra processed foods, which is essentially sugar, carb heavy foods.
Mm.
And teenagers, it's even worse. Teenagers are now getting 86% of their calories from ultra processed foods. That is a nutritional disaster.
It is.
Yeah. And again, in the Daily Telegraph today, what do we read? 23-year-old diagnosed with bowel cancer. And she'd seen endless doctors who all said, oh, you're too young to have bowel cancer. But she's got bowel cancer.
Mm,
And, almost certainly we can trace this back to poor diet, because it's diet that drives
yeah.
cancer. And I don't know her details of her history, bless her. But I say ultra processed foods is currently driving our epidemics of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and much more.
Well, this, you've hit the nail on the head. And what gets me with the mainstream, shall we say, is the fear porn that comes with it. You could be suffering from this. You can be suffering from that. Well, it could be, yeah. But why is there so much fear porn? Because it's good for holding stuff.
Correct. Correct.
Now,
Always follow the money. I mean, the pressure, for example, that
mm,
went out during COVID to lock down,
oh yes,
had no scientific basis whatsoever. It was
mm,
simply propaganda, narrative, peer pressure. The way that
that's right.
whole epidemic was handled was outrageously wrong and totally non-scientific.
Well, with Chris Whiffy, I used to call him, the chief medical officer, if you wanted proof that there's life from outer space living amongst us, he would have been it. When he gave that talk and he didn't blink. I mean, how do you set? I mean, it's impossible. Now, Paul has said, with the keto diet in mind, should we not be eating veggies and fruit? Because now that's an
Well,
interesting one.
the first point here is to say the carnivore diet is the evolutionary correct diet, and I'm sure some vegetables came into that. But problems arise when too much sugar creeps into our diet. Because if we have too much sugars and carbohydrates, when you say veggies, of course, that would include root vegetables like potato and parsnip, which are
Mm,
high carbohydrate. If we have too many carbohydrates in our diet, we overwhelm the ability of the upper gut to remain sterile. You see, the gut is a tube. It's a 30-foot tube, starts at the mouth, finishes at the anus. The first 25 foot of gut should be near sterile. And that is achieved by a nice acid stomach. Now, if we overwhelm the ability of acid in our stomach to sterilize that food, then foods start to ferment. And this is a disaster. Now, the trouble with fruit is it's a bag of sugar contained in a little, shell, a capsule that's covered in yeast. So if somebody settled down and ate half a pound of grapes, they're eating a bag of sugar covered with yeast. And guess what? That meal can ferment very quickly. And if that sugar ferments, you reproduce alcohol. This is called the auto brewery syndrome. And it's not just yeast that ferments, bacteria can ferment, and any sugars can be fermented, and any carbohydrates can be fermented to a whole range of toxic products. Like, yes, ethyl alcohol, but also propyl alcohol, butyl alcohol, D-lactate, aminoacyl compounds, hydrogen sulfate, a whole load of stuff. And that poisons us. It is a poisoning. Now, the liver, we evolved a fantastic liver, which is great at detoxification, and that does a wonderful job. But that is very demanding of energy and raw materials. And if we overwhelm our livers in their ability to detoxify, then those toxins will spill over into the bloodstream. And very often, the first thing people tell me when they do a keto diet and they sort out their upper fermenting gut is the foggy brain's gone. I can think
that's
clearly.
it. That's right.
Yeah. I don't wake up in the morning feeling I've got a hangover because they've been fermenting alcohol all night.
That's right. And also the taste of acetone. That's another one, isn't it? You're going into ketosis. You can sort of,
Well,
and
well,
it happened once with me. Acetone.
that's no
Acetone.
bad thing.
Yeah.
And it usually happens in the early stages of ketosis when the body has yet to become really efficient in its production of ketones, because smelling of ketones or peeing out a lot of ketones is, of course, it's like throwing calories away, isn't it? It's wasted energy. So the body gets much better at matching up energy requirements to energy delivery, and then that pair drops, that acetone taste or that
Mm.
smell usually disappears.
Now, That's Life But Not As We Know It has said, can you please ask the doctor about the best diet for someone who is type 1 diabetes?
Okay.
Diabetes.
Well, I'm going to tell you the story of an NHS GP called Dr. Ian Lake, who is based down in Stroud. Runs a wonderful website. Now, he was type 1 diabetic, diagnosed 20 years ago. He realized fairly early on in proceedings that a keto diet was the best diet. It is the best diet for type 1 diabetes. By dint of going keto, he's hugely reduced his dose of insulin that he requires. And his blood sugars have become completely stable. So much so that he did a 5-day fast during which he ran 20 miles every day. He ran from Stroud to Bristol, along with keto-adapted type 1 diabetic athlete Matthew Pinsent. His blood sugars were completely stable. His insulin requirements were unchanging. So the keto diet is absolutely essential for the type 1 diabetics. But, if you are going to swap, you must monitor your blood sugar continuously. Because if you're using insulin or any drug to lower blood sugar levels, you are at risk of low blood sugar. So I regularly do this with my diabetic patients, whether they're type 1 or type 2, but they have to wear continuous glucose monitor until they have stabilized, until they know the dose of insulin that they need, and they are well into ketosis. And you can do this yourself. You can buy these continuous glucose monitor on Amazon from Abbott Freestyle Libra. They cost about 60 quid. That gives you 2 weeks of continuous glucose monitoring. In fact, Abbott are quite helpful. Often they will give the diabetics a free continuous glucose monitor in order to get them going. But Dr. David Unwin, GP, Southport, in his practice, he has reversed 135 cases of type 2 diabetes simply with the ketogenic diet and maybe a few supplements. And the type 1s can be massively improved, stabilize out their blood sugar levels. And that is important because sugar is the major driver of pathology in the Western world currently. And if you stabilize out your blood sugar levels, then you are not going to die young from dementia, from heart disease, or from cancer. So absolutely, type 1 diabetes absolutely must go keto.
Okay, that's fantastic. And also, I think that was it. Sue Sparkle said she has ME, and any advice, because that's one of your specialist subjects is ME.
Correct.
And
Well, the key point to remember about ME is not a diagnosis, it's a clinical picture. We have to ask the question why. Now, chronic fatigue syndrome is the clinical picture when you have poor energy delivery mechanisms. ME is the clinical picture where you have poor energy delivery mechanisms and inflammation. And inflammation is pain, and it's pain which drags us down. Fibromyalgia, arthritis pain, inflammation pain. Very often people feel ill. They have this symptom of malaise, which is just like a chronic flu-like feeling. That means the immune system is busy. So, but regardless of whether you've got chronic fatigue or ME, I always start with energy delivery mechanisms. And the analogy I like to use is the car analogy. And for your body of a car to go, you've got to have the right fuel in the tank. Well, that's the paleo ketogenic diet and sorting out the upper fermenting gut. Then you've got to have some oxygen there. It doesn't take a genius to work out if you turn off the oxygen supply, your engine's going to stop pretty quickly. And then my special area of interest are mitochondria. And mitochondria are the engines of their car. Mitochondria take fuel from the bloodstream, ideally in the shape of ketones, burn that in the presence of oxygen to generate ATP, the energy molecule. And then we have the control mechanisms of the mitochondria, and that is the thyroid accelerator pedal. And believe you me, the underactive thyroid is incredibly common and very badly treated. And then the adrenal gearbox. And the adrenal gearbox allows us to gear up in response to stress. So if I'm trotting through the jungle, 500,000 years ago, and a saber-toothed tiger jumps out at me, I need to run the fastest mile I've ever run in my life. Otherwise, I'll become breakfast. And for that, we have an outpouring of adrenaline and cortisol and DHA to allow us that blood sugar to run high and us to sprint as fast as we have to. But now in the modern world, we are all living in a stressed state. It's constantly there. It might be work stress, financial stress, family stress, nutritional stress, or whatever. And that lends itself for adrenal exhaustion because we respond to that stress by pouring out the stress hormones, and that high level of adrenaline, that's what gives us blood pressure. It stops us sleeping. We just don't function to our full potential. So we have to tackle all 5 of those things. And it all starts off with that. So people listening to this program, you might forget all the fancy stuff about mitochondria and thyroid adrenals, but do the diet. That's the starting point. If you don't do the diet, then the mitochondria can't possibly work. If the mitochondria aren't working well, then the thyroid won't manifest on the mitochondria because the mitochondria are not in a fit state to respond. And so it goes on. So think food, think diet. That's the key.
Well, actually, I don't call it a diet. I call it change of lifestyle.
Voila.
Because to say diet, you initially immediately think, oh, I won't be able to eat this, I won't be able to eat that. Oh, and then the subconscious works and thinks, oh, I want some chocolate. That's definitely need some chocolate now. So and so to me, it's a change of lifestyle.
Correct,
That
correct. It's all about how we think about food.
now the ME person, Alice Gorgeous, says I find the keto diet very restrictive, but I'm hardwired for puddings. So was I.
That is the carbohydrate addict speaking. Now, we eat foods for two reasons. We eat foods because they're delicious, because the crunch factor, because the chew factor, because they're satisfying. But many people eat foods because they're looking for that carbohydrate hit. They are not satisfied until they've had a sugar hit at the end of a meal, and we call that sugar hit pudding. So I often see children, particularly autistic children or children with ADHD, and almost invariably their parents say, "Oh, they're fatty eaters. They'll only eat pasta, they'll only eat rice, they'll only eat sugar or whatever," and that's because having an illness as a child, whatever that may be, autism, ADHD, obsessive OCD, is highly stressful. And how do we cope with stress? We use addiction. And what addiction do kids use? They use sugars and carbs. So children in particular work out subconsciously that they can relieve their symptoms in the short term by having something sweet to eat, or having a highly processed food, or having a chocolate bar or a bag of crisps or whatever. In the short term, that affords relief, but then they immediately get withdrawal symptoms, and then they're drawn back to that food again. So what I would say to Alice Gorgeous, lovely surname, it's not that the keto diet is restrictive. On the keto diet, you can eat anything. It's a question of amount. You are looking, and hardwired for puddings gives the game away. You are looking for that carb hit. And if you don't get that carb hit, you're not happy. Now, addiction is all about avoidance. And once you can avoid, once you can get off, then life gets much easier. And we know this from people who smoke cigarettes. We know this from people who are alcoholics. What they celebrate is complete abstinence. So, if you have been alcoholic, you go to AA. There's only one rule there at AA, and that is no alcohol at all. Why? Because the drinker has one, has 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they're not happy until they're drunk. And it's exactly the same with sugar. We are not satisfied with one square of chocolate. It's got to be the whole bar. So I have an addiction test for foods because, believe you me, I'm an addict too, just like the rest of us Westerners. So my addiction test is, if I can have one or two of something and not consume the whole packet, that's okay to live in my pantry. So that's why I wouldn't have a bag of cashew nuts there, because if you give me one cashew nut, the whole bag goes.
I'm the same with cashews, yeah.
If you gave me one square of chocolate, the whole bar goes. If you gave me one fig, the whole packet goes. I'm an addict. But Brazil nuts, I can have a couple of Brazil nuts and I don't want any more. Olives, have 3 or 4 olives and I don't want any more. But I enjoy the taste of them. I enjoy the texture. And of course, the fatty foods that, like, good quality meats and hams and bacons and salamis, the fat is very satisfying. So I'll have my portion of meat. And yes, I do have green vegetables. And yes, I do have salad and avocado with olive oil drizzled on. And then I have my meal and I'm a happy bunny. I'm not thinking, oh, where's that sugar hit?
That's it.
And so, Alice, I'm afraid your question has given the game away. You're a carb addict. And just like the smoker and the drinker, you've got to cut them all out.
What about rice? Is that okay? Because someone said that's stodge.
It's very high. I mean, rice and white bread and the likes, they are very, very quickly digested in the upper gut to sugar. And having rice or potatoes or white bread is almost as bad as having sugar. You get a very, very quick insulin sugar spike. And if you want to demonstrate that, get yourself a continuous glucose monitor and see it. Because seeing is believing. It costs 60 quid, but it's the best lesson you'll ever have in your life. And what I suggest people do when they get one is put it on your arm and then it's painless. I'm a wimp, believe you me, but it doesn't hurt to put it on. You can then get continuous glucose for the first week, during which the first week you eat your normal diet, and just see for yourself what that hardwired for puddings does for your blood sugar, to see what that glass of orange juice at breakfast does, to
Mm.
see what those squares of chocolate do, and you will be horrified. And then the second week, you say, right, I'm going to go keto. And for many, the most intellectually simple way to go keto is to eat a carnivore diet: meat, fish, eggs, and I allow butter in the carnivore diet. Although dairy products, are arguably carnivore, because dairy allergy is so common, I think it's a good idea to cut that out initially. Butter, you can be allergic to butter, but it's unusual because butter is very low in milk protein. But
Mm.
do a carnivore diet for the second week. And again, see what it does. Fascinating experiment. But it'll really wake people up. It'll really wake you up, open your eyes to what we are doing to our blood sugars when we eat a normal Western diet. Because normal Western diets, that's why currently life expectancy is falling. Dementia, heart disease, and cancer are all rising without exception.
Yes, they are. And was it? I'm old enough to remember this. I should give him age away. Richard Nixon said the war on its cancer, and
The war on cancer. And he spent billions, and it didn't make one jot of difference,
that's right.
because those
Well,
those
it did make a
researchers were looking at cancer. They weren't asking about root causes, and the major root cause is eating sugar, which feeds cancer cells.
well. I think it did make a bit of a difference with the old bank balances. That made a big difference. That very healthy bank balances they were after that. No, sorry, I'm being sarcastic.
But not for the peasants, not for peasants
Precisely.
like you and me. Mm.
Precisely. But the one thing I was going to ask you, because you're very good, excellent iodine, is it okay to put it in hot drinks? Because does it kill it at all? Because
Oh no,
I
it
just have a
wouldn't.
drop in it because it
Okay,
doesn't
okay.
exactly the
Well,
nicest taste.
I use iodine in many different ways. Now, I like, as I say, the upper fermenting gut is very
Mm,
common. It's very common because people are eating sugar and carbohydrate based diets. And the way to treat the upper fermenting gut is, first of all, stop feeding it with sugars and carbs, i.e., do a keto diet. And secondly, kill the microbes which are there. Now, the two tools I use to do that are vitamin C and iodine, because both vitamin C and iodine contact kill all microbes. So I usually start off with just 1 drop of iodine a day in a glass of water and increase that to 3 drops. So that's a great treatment for the upper fermenting gut. And then I also use it for any respiratory infection, because the joy of Lugol's iodine, which is what you're showing there, is the iodine in it is volatile. You can smell it. So at the first hint of any infection, I don't know if people can see this or they're just listening, but use a salt pipe, which is just a plastic tube with some holes in the bottom, which you can probably see there, and it's full of sea salt, which you can probably hear. So 2 drops of Lugol's iodine into the top of it. So like this. I hope you can see that. So one,
yeah,
2 drops like that, and then sniff it. So if you put it to the nose and sniff like that, so you're pulling air through the salt pipe into the nose, it you can smell it very easily. So you have this iodine vapor in the nose, the sinuses, the pharynx, the larynx, the chest. Contact kills all microbes. There's no virus, no bacteria, no yeast that is not killed by iodine. You massively reduce the infectious load, and that can prevent a cold from developing, a flu from developing. And in fact, I have 5 patients with bronchiectasis. Now, bronchiectasis is chronic lung infection. And then the normal history of somebody with chronic lung infection, bronchiectasis, bronchitis, whatever, is they go from one antibiotic, then they're a bit well, and then they go to another antibiotic, and then they're okay for a bit, and then another antibiotic, until they end up with the multi-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and then they're in big trouble. But by dint of doing a keto diet and sniffing iodine regularly, their need for antibiotics has dropped to 0. They don't need them anymore. They can get rid of the infection with that. And this is a very, very important, because bronchiectasis is a nasty lung infection that kills people.
yes, it's quite surprising. Now, EXO says, my question, Eric, is To what degree does Dr. Sarah think the impact of gluten intolerance and glyphosate is a major cause of undiagnosed sickness today? That's a good question, isn't it?
And the answer is to a very high degree. I attended a conference some years ago now, and the consensus of the conference was that gluten grains were too toxic for humans. They should be animal consumption only. Now, that is for a number of reasons. First of all, gluten is a major allergen. And so many allergic disorders like irritable bowel syndrome, migraine, arthritis, fibromyalgia are driven by gluten allergy. So that's number one. And just because you have a blood test that, a tissue transaminase that is negative, doesn't mean it's safe to eat gluten. The second problem with gluten grains is they're very high in lectins, and lectins are toxic to us. Many gluten grains are now genetically modified, and we know that drives leaky gut with all the problems that go with that. That will make the fermenting gut much worse. And of course, the gluten grains are very high in carbohydrates. And carbohydrate is instantly digested to sugar and gives us a sugar spike. So I don't think anybody should be eating gluten grains. They are not part of the paleo diet. Okay, glyphosate, major problem. Not my words, but the words of Stephanie Seneff, who wrote a terrific book called A Toxic Legacy. Should be compulsory reading for all. And she points out that we are using glyphosate, or rather, farmers are using glyphosate in agrochemicals in massive doses. So if you work out the pounds of glyphosate sprayed onto American crops and the number of people who are in America, we are all Americans, and it's probably the same in this country, are
Mm.
consuming about 1 gram of glyphosate a day. Now, 1 gram of glyphosate is 1,000 milligrams of glyphosate. Most drugs are given in milligram amounts. So we're not talking about trace amounts and there's just a little bit there. We are talking about very large doses of. And glyphosate has malign effects for a multiplicity of reasons. First of all, it's an organophosphate, and organophosphates inhibit oxidative phosphorylation, which is how we make energy. So they're going to impact on our energy delivery mechanisms. Glyphosate is a known carcinogen, driving cancer, a known mutagen, driving birth defects. 54% of the microbiome is sensitive to glyphosate. Now, we don't know much about the microbiome, but what we do know is that the more diverse it is, the healthier you are. And if 54% of those microbes are going to be killed by glyphosate, we have a less diverse microbiome. And that's very bad news for our immunity and for immune tolerance. Glyphosate is a very small molecule and it substitutes for glycine. Glycine is an amino acid essential for connective tissue. Now, I'm seeing a huge amount of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and hypermobility that could well be explained by glyphosate. We don't know, it's biologically plausible, but it's reasonable that
Mm.
is the case. Glyphosate works in the soil because it's a chelating agent. It binds up all the minerals in the soil. So all our crops are going to be deficient. So the fact is there's a multiplicity of reasons why glyphosate is toxic to us. And I don't think it's ever been more important for us to spend our money on the best quality food we can find, the best quality organic food. Now, I'm very mindful organic food is expensive, but we should be prioritizing that over, addictions like, alcohol, smoking, expensive holidays, or whatever. Life is all about food, and we must get the best quality food we possibly
I
can.
agree.
So I think that's a great question, and I would entirely concur with that.
Well, I'd agree with you. And a lot of people now, I mean, putting the architectural hat on, once upon a time when they designed in the states, and this is going back to the 1920s and 30s. Sorry, I'm not that old. And they would actually design it so that you would have farms around that could supply the food to the people. So, but now, oh, forget it. I mean, we're living in a just-in-time supermarket world, and quite honestly, I mean, when you look at the amount of carbs that's thrown at you when you walk into a supermarket, it's horrendous.
Correct.
I try and grow as much as I can. Yeah, sorry,
It's not entirely the fault of the food producers. The food producers will only produce the food that people will buy.
that's
But
right.
you see, I'll tell you a story now. Back to the 1980s, when the number one cause of disease then was probably cigarette smoking. And the anti-cigarette smoking lobby came in, so we've got to cut down cigarette smoking. Now, the cigarette smoking companies spent a fortune on scientists making cigarettes as addictive as possible. And they achieved that by putting extra nicotine in the cigarettes, by putting sugar in the cigarettes, because those obviously increase the addictive potential of. But when
Wow.
cigarette advertising was banned, and people eventually understood or were educated that cigarette smoking is not good for their health, the cigarette companies realized that they couldn't make money at that. And so they started buying up the food companies. And those scientists that they employed to make cigarettes more addictive, they then asked them to turn their attention to foods. How can they make foods more addictive? And this is the origin of ultra processed foods, because those scientists started designing foods that had just the right amount of sugar, fat, salt, crunch factor to make that food addictive, to
Mm.
make it feel good in the mouth. That, say, that crunch factor. And believe me, I'm an addict. I could happily crunch my way through a mountain of crisps, but
Yeah.
I don't. So having done that, what that meant then is, instead of people being addicted to cigarettes, they then got addicted to their food. And ultra processed food is the big problem of modern
Mm.
societies. So it's all about, we have to educate people about ultra processed foods in the same way they were educated about cigarette smoking. But it's going to be, it's slow to educate people. And as they say in the world, science proceeds funeral by funeral.
Oh, that's a good one. That's an excellent one. But the thing is, I've got to be a bit careful because we're on YouTube, but it's an industry and a very, very,
It
very
is
profitable
industry. It's a
industry.
very powerful
I
industry,
mean,
and your big food, big pharma, big agriculture dominates, and they are trying to get us to consume their products. And if you make those products addictive, then people are going to consume them.
well, we have the bowler hat farmer on here regularly and what he has to say. And what he's trying to do is persuade farmers to rent off or sell a little part of their land or devote a part of their land to grow vegetables to sell directly to the public, organic vegetables. And what he does, he doesn't go through all this licensing and that. He says, look, they are organic, but I can't say they're organic because I'd have to have all the bureaucracy involved. I mean, I with chicken, um, I will only, well, I say I only buy organic. I go to the last farm that's within walking distance of my house, which is hanging on by its fingernails, I think.
Oh,
And I buy chicken from there, which is doesn't say organic, but it
it
is.
is.
But I would not have anything that is sold on the. I mean, when you look at chicken, I mean, the amount of what's pumped into those chickens, it's
I know.
unbelievable.
I know.
It's
I mean,
frightening.
the best meats to eat in this country would be beef and lamb, because largely
Mm,
speaking, they're grass fed. But
mm.
pork and chicken are reared intensively. So if you're going to buy organic meat, buy organic pork and organic chicken. Say beef and lamb are much better quality. And again, for vegetables, oh, it's just essential. I mean, my daughter lives down in Brighton, and she has an organic box delivered every week. It costs about £20 a week, and you just get whatever turns up. But it's
Mm.
delicious, it's nourishing, and of course you eat it up by the end of the week because you paid for it, and then another one comes along the next week. So this is what we must do. It's up to us peasants to be prepared to spend a little bit more to try and find the best food, and then the farmers will produce to meet that demand. But while people are still going into supermarkets and buying cheap ultra processed foods, then big pharma and big food will go on producing those foods.
Well, that's it. And actually, I found a way around the old potato situation. Now, it might work, it might not work, but I actually, I don't know if it's wise. I do like fried things. We all do. I've
So
got an
do
air
I.
fryer. And what I use instead of, for our American listeners, they're fries, but we call them chips. I use carrots and parsnips. And they're lovely and sweet. And they're nice and crunchy and they're super duper. And you think,
That's
"Ooh,
great.
why do I ever
And,
eat potatoes?"
And I like chips too, but the way I do them passes my addiction test. So the way I do potatoes is in the morning, I don't peel them. I'm very lucky. I've got my own garden, so I've got my own organic
Mm,
potatoes. I boil them, and then I let them go cool. And when you boil them and let them go cool, much of the starch is turned to resistant starch. And then I cut them very thinly and either roast them in the oven or fry them in a frying pan. And I only have to have 4 or 5, rounds or whatever, and I'm
mm,
completely satisfied. I don't have to eat a great pile of potatoes to satisfy. And more importantly, if I check my blood sugars, I'm still in ketosis and I'm not spiking my blood sugar. So that tells me that's okay for me to do potatoes in that way. But everybody is a little bit different. Everybody will respond to foods in a different way depending on how old they are, how much muscles they've got, how much exercise they do, and all that. So this is why continuous glucose monitoring and checking ketones
mm,
is so helpful. Compounded by the fact that some people will react allergically to a food by spiking their blood sugar. So, what your suggestion, Eric, to make parsnip and carrot chips is a great suggestion, but don't assume it's right for everybody.
mm.
Please, people go away, experiment, do make parsnip chips. Remember, always cook with saturated fat, never cook with oils. That flips them into dangerous trans fats. Always cook with saturated fats, whether it's lard, coconut oil, butter, whatever. But once you've got a diet that you think suits you, check with continuous glucose monitor to be sure, because you might be different from everybody else.
Okay. And I'll tell you something, Lidl's sell organic coconut oil, which is pretty good. So it's just change out, it's just over £2 a jar, but I actually
Fantastic.
get lard.
Fantastic. But the thing is,
Mm,
coconut trees are one of the least sprayed, crops in the world. So even if you can't stretch to organic coconut oil is going to be pretty clean.
yeah.
Ditto avocados. One of the worst sprayed crops are strawberries because they're sweet, they're on the ground, and they're massively sprayed.
Mm.
So do check. Some crops are much more sprayed than others.
Ah, that's interesting about straw, but I grow my own. But
So
I like what the the bowler hat farmer said. He says that what is it? Rapeseed oil is actually tractor oil. That's what it's originally developed for. He said so. You're consuming tractor oil, but what gets me is I don't touch dairy, but I do like to have some sort of milk in my tea, and I have rhubarb tea or rubbish tea, as some people call it. And the big problem when you look on the ingredients of the label of these oat milks, which oat is not that good, the second ingredient is sunflower oil.
I know, and they're quite high carb as well. If you
Mm.
want to whiten it, what I use is if I use any, I use coconut cream, which is 2% carb and mainly fat. In fact, having got the keto diet in place, the next step in the evolution is to do time restricted eating. Aim to eat all foods within, ideally a 6 hour window. And so, and the best meal to skip is breakfast because we normally get a spike of sugar in the morning.
Really?
That's what wakes us up. So what wakes up in the morning is your adrenal glands swinging into life, pouring out adrenaline, cortisol. That wakes us up, and it also spikes our blood sugar.
I didn't
So
know that.
that is the time of the day. If you're going to do any exercise, fitness training or a bit of jogging, that's the time to do it first thing in the morning to burn off that sugar because exercise brings the blood sugar down very quickly.
Hmm.
Skip breakfast because that high blood sugar sustains us through the morning, and then consume all food within 6 hours. So maybe lunch at 12:30, supper at 6 o'clock. But what is often a useful start to the day is what's called bulletproof coffee. So a little tass of coffee, not a big mug, a little tass of coffee with a spoonful of coconut oil in, or butter, or MCT oil like that. Doesn't break a fast, but gives us lovely fats and oils that go straight into the bloodstream, straight to the liver, convert into ketones, and that powers you through the morning and stops you from and helps to prevent hunger. Now, I intermittent fast, so I aim to have all my calories within all my food within a 6 hour window.
Mm.
And the reason for that is because after 16 hours of fasting, you switch on autophagy or self eating. And that is the biochemical equivalent of doing a spring clean. So any old senescent cells, cancer cells that are circulating around the body that need to be got rid of, That's when they are mopped up and got out the way. And and that is a great way to prevent and treat cancer in particular. And the fact of the matter is, just from background radiation alone, just by existing on this world, that will generate about 10,000 mutations every second. So we're
Wow.
producing cancer cells all the time. If you looked
Mm.
hard enough, you'd find cancer cells in my bloodstream. But if we're not feeding with sugar, so they're just growing very, very slowly. And we have 2 hours every day when the immune system go around and gobble them up. They're not going to progress onto a nasty big tumor that's going to kill us. So, when you turn into an old crone like me, then you have to think a little bit hard about, I don't want to get Parkinson, I don't want to get cancer, I don't want to get dementia.
Mm.
You have to work harder at it. Young people can get away with blue murder. Having said which, they're not getting away with blue murder any at the moment. As I say, ultra processed foods, the age of cancer and heart disease is coming down, down, down all the time. As I mentioned earlier,
Yes.
23-year-old with bowel cancer. 23-year-olds should not be getting bowel cancer.
Mm.
So,
Yes.
so as I say, having got keto, the next thing to do is time restricted eating, and that's another great leap forward.
Oh, yes. I go about 18 hours every day.
Perfect. 18 hours is
Yeah.
fine because say you turn on autophagy at 16 hours, so that means you have 2 hours every day, and then
Mm.
maybe once a week just have one meal a day. Maybe every I do a 3-day
Mm.
fast, spring, summer, autumn, winter, because as you do longer fasting, you get other benefits. You get gut cells reset, you get immune system resets, you stimulate stem cells, you get other bonuses as well. I approach these fasts with a slight sense of dread because I'm greedy. I love my food.
I'm again it. I love
But
food. I mean, I love cooking, but I think you've just answered the question that Blu-ray 144 has said. What is the best to eat for breakfast? And you just answered it. But I actually do. I do have a big breakfast. That's the thing, a nice meaty
well,
breakfast. So
well, that's a good starting point. But the
yeah,
next thing to do is have your breakfast a bit later and a bit later and a bit later until you're having your breakfast at midday.
yeah, I
And yeah,
see.
bacon, eggs, sausage, black pudding, fantastic.
That's it.
That's what I love to have for my normal
Ooh,
lunch. And so it's usually a carnivore lunch, and the joy about a carnivore lunch. It's very easy. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to prepare vegetables. I don't have to get stuff out of the deep freeze. I just stick a couple of burgers in the pan, a couple of eggs. Bob's your uncle. It's quick and
yeah.
easy, and totally delicious and satisfying. And that powers me through the day. And then
Mm.
in the evening, yep, I have more lovely food.
Well, yes, I'm a bit like that, and I think that now let's what we got here. No, we got right. Alice Gorgeous, what a nice name. We have a responsibility to the next generations. We need to replenish the land. Also, be aware of the fact that it's supply and demand. If we don't buy it, they'll stop producing it. That's correct. That's correct.
Spot on. Absolutely
Yes.
spot on. And the shameful thing about this massive production of poor quality foods is we're just degrading the soil,
Yes.
and we're losing soil erosion. A friend of mine lives in Norfolk, and he watched a field being harvested for baby greens. These little packets of mini rocket and mini lettuces and mini herbs, whatever that you get in the supermarket
Mm.
that look
Oh, I
awfully
know.
healthy. Yeah. So he said to the guy, well, how do you do this? Oh, he said, we spray the whole field off with glyphosate to kill everything. Then
Mm.
we drill it, direct drill with whatever we want to grow. 6 weeks later, we come along and harvest it all off the supermarket. Then we spray it off with glyphosate again. And we repeat the process. So that field is having, 3, 4, 5, crops every single time sprayed with glyphosate. And glyphosate can be in the soil for up to 700 days later. So you're building up the level of this toxic chemical in the fields. It's getting straight into the foods and straight onto the supermarket shelves. So it's just
Mm.
bad all round. It's not doing any good for anybody except follow the money.
Well, that's it. It's a money trail. The only thing with fasting is I find after about 18 hours, you get a little bit giddy sometimes because you're a bit until you get used to it. That's the little downside I found.
Okay, well, let's say there are tricks of the trade one can use to help
Mm.
fasting. And there's a lovely lady who regularly does YouTube videos that I love called Dr. Mindy Peltz. wrote a lovely book, Fast Like a Girl and Others. And she gives some really good tips about
Mhm.
fasting. And she makes a point: if you have small, low calorie keto foods, that won't break a fast. So, for example, one hard boiled egg, or a cup of bone broth with salt in it, or half an avocado pear with a bit of olive oil. That doesn't break a fast. Now, that kind of giddiness that you get, it will pass. So
Mm.
you just sit down, put your feet up for a bit, and it passes. So don't think, oh, I'm going to be stuck like this for the next 3 days. It's not like that. The body does adjust, and that business of adjustment is important because it's called metabolic flexibility. The body needs to learn to sometimes burn sugars and carbohydrates, but most of the time be in ketosis. That is the healthy way to be. And that metabolic flexibility is all about insulin and and adrenaline and thyroid hormones, of course.
Well, I actually find that, I mean, I have about 3 eggs a day, and eggs, fantastic.
Fantastic.
They really are. Now, what we got here, EXO has said, another point Dr. Sarah mentions, mutations caused by radiation, etc. What does she think of new range of algae
Yeah.
formulations that claim to be both super nutritious but also repair radiation damage? I don't know anything about that.
Well, I'd like to see a paper that demonstrates that that is the case. I mean, the most nutritious foods we can eat, dare I say, are meat, fish, and eggs. Radiation damage, that is, yes, we can repair our DNA. There's an enzyme that does that is called DNA repair, and that is dependent on zinc, and zinc deficiency is very common. So, we should all be taking a zinc supplement, or say, meat is very rich in zinc. So I'm not sure that algae does repair radiation damage. So I'd love to see a paper that demonstrated that. But it does flag up another issue, which is that we are all poisoned without exception, not just by radiation, but with heavy metals and with also pesticides and volatile organic compounds. And I
Mm.
know this because I used to do a lot of toxicity tests. So my favorite test to look for pesticides and volatile organic compounds was a fat biopsy. Very easy to do. Just stick a needle into the fat, pull the needle out, and the fat contained within the bore of the needle was sufficient for analysis. I never once saw a normal result. We are
Really?
all, without exception, carrying a toxic load of pesticides, volatile organic compounds, fire retardants, plasticiders, phthalates, polybrominated biphenyls, you name it. So, obviously we should be, and these are all carcinogens, they're all toxic to us. So obviously we should be doing our best to avoid, and it's impossible to avoid everything, including glyphosate. But we can get rid of these toxins. We can get rid of these toxins with heating regimes. And it doesn't matter what that heating regime is. And the idea here is that these toxins are contained within our fat, and that includes our subcutaneous fat. And when you get hot, you physically mobilize these toxins onto the lipid layer on the surface of the skin, from where they can be washed off. So we know this from research done by Professor Bill Ray out in America, and I've confirmed that with my own figures because I've collected data. And the point is, it doesn't matter what that heating regime is. So if you're an athlete and you're going for a run and you shower off afterwards, you've done a detox regime. If you're sick and you can't exercise, Epsom salts in the bath will do a great job. Or sunbathing followed by washing off. The washing off is as important as the heating regime. And I know from experience that, roughly speaking, heating regimes, 50 of them will halve your total body load. So if you have a notional load of 64 parts per million, 50 will bring it down to 32, another 50 will bring it down to 16, another 50 will bring it down to 8, to 4, to 2, and so on. You never get rid of every last toxin. There will always be a few there. But if it's just a few, the body can cope with that. But if it's a lot and becomes overwhelming, it's going to drive cancer, heart disease, and dementia. So the heating regimes are really, really important. And I think we should all do them because we are all exposed. As I say, I've never seen a normal test. And the
Good point.
second major cause of toxicity is from heavy metals. And again, we can measure toxic metals in urine with urine tests, but we have to do it with a chelating agent. Now, the reason for this is these heavy metals, they get stuck in our organs. They get stuck in our heart, in our bone, in our kidneys, in our brain. And guess what? I don't want somebody doing a brain biopsy on me or a heart biopsy on me. And it's not a good idea to stick needles in somebody's brain or somebody's heart. But we can measure the load by using, say, a chelating agent. Chelate comes from the Greek word claw. So this claw goes in, grabs the heavy metal, and pulls it out through the urine. Again, I've never seen a normal test. We all have a burden of mercury, arsenic, cadmium, aluminium, or whatever. Now, the problem with chelating agents, they're rather expensive. But thanks to a very fortuitous observation, as we speak, I'm conducting a study. It looks like methyl sulfonyl methane is going to be a very good chelator of heavy metals. Now, this isn't for sure yet. As I say, I'm collecting data as we speak. But the point about MSM is it's very cheap. Anybody can access it. It does lots of other good things. It's an antioxidant. It protects from cancer. It's good for the upper fermenting gut. It's good for connective tissue. And we're all sulfur deficient. Not my words, but again, the words of Stephanie Seneff. So taking MSM can be very helpful for us all for a multiplicity of reasons, not least of all detoxing. But, please start off with tiny doses. Just a quarter of a teaspoon initially and build up slowly. And the reason I say that is because I heard of a person, thankfully not one of my patients, who started herself on a big dose of MSM and she jumped into atrial fibrillation. Why? She suddenly mobilized heavy metals and that upset the pacemaker. Now, thankfully, she realized, stop the MSM, and she jumped back into sinus rhythm. But whenever you get any sort of detox regime like this, any sort of healing intervention, you can trigger a detox reaction, a healing crisis, which can be quite powerful. So any new intervention, doesn't matter if it's iodine, vitamin C, going onto a keto diet, starting MSM, doing the heating regimes, the sicker you are, the slower you go. But we should all, I'm coming to the view, we should all be doing it all. And these regimes are cheap, easy to put in place, within everybody's grasp to do it. You just have to, as my daughter would say, you've just got to get your shit together.
Correct. Well, I'll tell you something. I was surprised. I mean, I've been on your site. I'm surprised how reasonable. I mean, this iodine was extremely reasonable. I can't remember how much it was now, but it
£7.
was.
It's £7 for a bottle, and that will last you weeks and weeks and weeks.
And remember, 15%, and you go anywhere else, and it's 4 or 5%. You won't get 15%. You're the only person I know of that you do 15%. So this is the strong stuff. This is the real McCoy. This is. So
Well, I
Lugol.
have to tell you, I have to tell you a joke to explain my philosophy.
Yeah.
And this pertains to a newspaper article I read some years ago, which is about a merchant bank that wanted to target its wealthiest clients for a new investment scheme. So it wrote a standard letter and sent that down to the mail merge department. The idea of mail merge is that everybody would receive a personalised letter, dear Lord this, dear Sir that. But the scruff in the mail merge department forgot to press the mail merge button. So their wealthiest clients received a letter that opened up, dear rich bastard. so,
Oh, that's a good one.
so that has been subsumed into my language. And, my patients, some are RBs, but 99% are PBs. They're poor baskets. They cannot afford expensive treatments. So I've concentrated my efforts on finding treatments that everybody can access, that are affordable, that are intrinsically safe, that do more than one job, that multitask. So, for example, MSM is good for the upper fermenting gut, for metal detoxing, for protecting from cancer as an antioxidant. Iodine multitasks. It's good for the upper fermenting gut, protects from cancer, helps to pull out heavy metals, essential for for the brain and for the nervous system and for the immune system. And we should all be doing it all.
Yeah.
Because the shameful thing is, the doctors aren't doing it. And the few naturopathic physicians or whatever that are doing, there's not enough to go round. So my job is to educate, as I call it, to give, my poor, PBs throughout the world the rules of the game and the tools of the trade so they can do it themselves. And my sales at Dr. Myhill, yes, I make a bit of money at it, but my philosophy is pile it high and sell it cheap,
We got to
because
survive.
I want my PBs all to be able to put in
Yeah.
place these important and very powerful interventions.
Well, the first question, I mean, I had blood pressure once upon a time that was through the roof, about 205 over something. And I actually spent a night in hospital with it. And the first question they should have asked, in hindsight, was, "What do you eat?"
Correct. And they never ask that
Never do.
question. I'll tell you another fascinating case,
Mm.
case history which illustrates that very point. Girl came to see me. I was running an ME clinic at Shrewsbury Hospital. She came to see me, weak from the waist downwards. She was only 25 or something, and she was on crutches. She couldn't move from the waist downwards. And she said, "I've been told by my neurologist I've got ME." I said, "Rubbish, you've not got ME. You've got a neurological condition." Anyway, to cut a very long story short, nobody had taken a dietary history. She was drinking 3 litres a day of Diet Coke. Diet Coke is sweetened with aspartame.
Oh my God.
Aspartame is broken down in the liver to phenylalanine and formaldehyde, and formaldehyde is a neurotoxin. As soon as she cut out her 3 litres a day of Diet Coke, her strength came back and she ended up walking normally. But nobody had taken a dietary history.
No, they don't. This is the frightening thing, and I don't know. Is it somebody told me? I don't know. It's a wives' tale that doctors only get, was it half a day, um,
Nutrition.
education on vitamins? Is that true when you're at medical
Well,
college? Half a day or so? I don't know. I mean,
When
I'm.
when I was at medical school in the 1970s, I don't remember any nutritional training whatsoever. In fact,
Really?
when we're doing our theoretical stuff, the first hour of every single day for a whole year was pharmacology. The drug companies were in there at a very early stage. And I
Oh
came
yeah.
out of medical school thinking everything had a pharmacological solution. And, within a few days, of general practice, people coming in saying, why have I got chilblains? Why have I got eczema? I realized I knew nothing at all. And I was embarrassed to be a general practitioner. I just didn't know the answers to any of these questions. And my usual ploy was, oh well, let's do a blood test and come back next week. During which time I'd rush out and phone a friend and look in my books, and the answers weren't in the medical textbooks either.
Hmm. You're right. You're spot on. Absolutely spot on. It's a bit like in architecture, first people to come in with the Cement and Concrete Association in their cam, here boys, you had all the goodies all handed out. And Paul said, if I have bacon and eggs, I find they tend to repeat on me. It's a bit like lychees. I can't eat lychees. I find they repeat on me. Don't
Okay,
know why.
okay. Well, food repeating on you is typical of the upper fermenting gut. So my guess is that you're not keto adapted, you're not carnivore, you do have some carbohydrates bubbling away in your gut, because regurgitation of food and reflux is typical of the upper fermenting gut. So I would want to know a little bit more about that. But bacon and eggs is a perfect meal. I mean, you can have foods repeating on you if you're allergic to them, but it's unusual to be allergic to bacon and eggs. So that'd be a less likely explanation.
Mm.
But my guess is that if you went proper carnivore, real keto, then that symptom would just melt away.
The thing is, though, with bacon, I mean, you've got nitrates involved. And I don't know how sort of serious that is, because I know there's only one label I know of called Naked. They do bacon, which is no nitrates in it, but that's the only people I
Okay.
know. And the
Now,
farm shop I go to, I'm not sure they do pork. I don't know. But,
now you really don't need to worry about nitrites.
mm,
And the most protective thing we can do against them is to take vitamin C. And the fact of the matter is, we should all be taking some vitamin C. Not my words, the words of Linus Pauling, very clever scientist, the only man to win 2 Nobel Prizes in his own right, and he was only beaten to a third by Watson and Crick, who discovered the double helix.
yes.
But Linus Pauling devoted the last third of his life to the study of vitamin C. Now, the fascinating thing about vitamin C is that it's humans, fruit bats, and guinea pigs who cannot make their own vitamin C. All other animals, my little dog,
Mm,
the cattle, the sheep out in the fields in front of me, they can make their own vitamin C. And Pauling calculated from what animals synthesize what we should have. and he came up with about five, I think it's 5.4 grams a day was his calculation. 5 grams a day is a rounded teaspoon, and that keeps nitrites from causing any toxicity or any problems at all. So I take
Oh,
5 grams of vitamin C every day. Everybody should take 5 grams of vitamin C a day. It's cheap. You can buy half a kilogram for about 17 quid, and that lasts a jolly long time. Stir it into a glass of warm water, and then slug it back, and that will keep you free from problems of nitrites for the next few days, let alone 24 hours.
well, the other thing though with vitamin C, I mean, they do have fake vitamin C, so I would advise not to go into the supermarkets or, shall we say, the high street shops where you can buy the vitamins for £1. Also, I didn't say the pound shop, nothing like that. No, it's a coin. But there's a difference between vitamins because you're probably getting a lot of filler, and you probably get more
That's
vitamin C from sniffing the packet. You know.
Well, that's right. I mean, a supermarkets obviously want to sell their goods, so they'll do a bit of
Mm.
research, and they'll find out that people are prepared to spend £2.31 a month on vitamins and minerals. So they produce a product that costs £2.31. But as you point out, the contents will be far from perfect. Either they'll be inadequate doses, or they'll be in a form that's not absorbable,
Mm.
or they'll be in the wrong balance with each other, or there'll be far too much calcium and iron in them, which both not good news for the body. We shouldn't have any supplements that have got iron in them, and calcium should be at very, very low levels.
Really, that's interesting. Now, see, between you and I, so put your fingers in your ears, everybody who's in the audience. I'm one of these prepper types, sort of tins of this and tins of that, just in case the balloon goes up. And I've got lots of tins of corned beef 'cause I think
Nothing wrong with that.
that's good.
Corned beef is a fabulous food.
Yeah.
Keto, it's nutritious, and and it'll keep for emergency supplies and tins
Mm.
very nice indeed. So you could be a very popular boy if the balloon goes up and Armageddon comes sooner
Yes.
rather than later.
And there'll be a queue outside my house. But no, what I was going to say is a tip. I don't know how you do this with bacon. Apparently, the top chefs do this. You actually put a little bit of water in the pan and let it boil, and then it fries on its own fat when the water's boiled away. Apparently, it's supposed to be crispier doing it that way. So,
Well, when I do bacon, of course, I'm in a very privileged position because I'm very
mm,
mindful of foods, but I have my own pigs, so I have my own bacon. But
yes.
I cook it on a off the pan on a grill, and so the fat goes through, and I use the fat that goes through to roast vegetables in or my linseed bread in, but it leaves the bacon the most beautiful, crisp,
Oh.
crunchy, like pork cracklings that you've ever had in your life. It's absolutely divine.
Now, Barefoot Foreigner has said, when you were talking about, working up a perspiration and then washing it off, she said, yes, somebody's washing it off with fluoride and chlorine and hormones and glyphosate infused tap water. I think you can buy these special sprays, or, I mean, I actually filter my water with, not for washing though, for drinking, I use a zero water filter. But that takes
Well, you can.
everything out.
But my guess is if you're just washing off in a shower, there's just very little opportunity for those chemicals to penetrate through the flesh. If you've got soap, you've had an exercise, you've had your sauna, you've been sunbathing. My guess is that the absorption through the skin is going to be minimal. The greatest problems come when you drink that water, and drinking water. That's when we need the cleanest water we can possibly get, and we shouldn't be drinking water out of the tap. A very popular
Mm,
water filter is the Berkey water filter that takes
mm,
out the heavy metals and many of the volatile organic compounds. If you want to take out fluoride, then you need reverse osmosis filter, but that's all possible. So it's the
mm.
drinking the water that's the big issue. I wouldn't worry too much about showering or bathing in it.
Well, the thing is, between you and I, you can actually make your own Berkey filter, providing you buy an Italian flower pot and plug the bottom with, yeah, seriously, and you can make your own. So,
Great. Oh, well, you
good
taught
tip.
me something. You have to send me the
Yeah.
recipe. You can send it around my
So,
ping. Yeah.
yeah, you see, the thing is that providing it's Italian, if you buy a Chinese flower pot, it might have lead in it. But so the
And actually,
Italian
that
ones are
brings up
good.
another very important point, because when
Mm,
I do heavy metal testing, I often find barium. And barium is a heavy metal, it's potentially toxic. And I just think to myself, where is that coming from? And I discovered recently that it's probably coming from pottery, because at one stage, lead used to be used as the glaze for pottery
Mhm.
mugs, and that was replaced by barium. So maybe that, the glazes on our pottery mugs that we drink our tea and coffee from, maybe we're getting barium from that. This is now I've got to do some more research, but this is the
That's
interest of
interesting.
medicine. I'm always picking up on little things, think, oh, must research that, must research that, and say therein lies the joy.
Well, I'll tell you something. Epsom salts and cheap porridge oats, mix them up, put them in the old compost. As long as you don't sort of grow cabbages or anything on it, but you put that for your plants, your flowers that you don't eat, and they come up a treat. That's a little tip there, you see.
Thank you for
So
that.
if you bought some porridge, you think, oh no, it's got all the the rubbish in it. Give it to your flowers; they love it. now, Paul. Now, Paul has got an interesting one here. What is the best way to heal a hernia in the stomach without going through an operation?
Oh, crumbs. There isn't a good way that I know of. And when you say hernia, I'm not sure. I mean, there are different types of hernias. So, it could be in the groin, or it can be a incisional hernia in the middle. But there is no easy alternative there. The only thing I would say is surgery. Obviously, may well be necessary. Is make sure that they don't use a silicone mesh. I see so many people who get allergic and immunological reactions to silicone meshes, that's the thing to make sure the surgeon doesn't use one. But I don't think there is an easy way to heal a hernia in a stomach. I mean, building up your muscles may well be helpful if you can get your stomach muscles strong enough. But most people, if it's a problem, they generally need surgery. So I'm sorry about that.
And now, Alex Gorgeous is an interesting one. Oh, by the way, someone thinks I've got a corned beef fetish, so i.e. corned beef fetish. Have I really? Well, there we go. Um, Chemtrails have barium, hence there's no such thing as organic.
I am
That's
aware that
unfortunate.
chemtrails have barium, but it's just the case of the amounts, because yes, I know barium's used to seed clouds, but there's going to be a massive dilution effect in the atmosphere in the rain, and I just don't think that there's that would be enough to account for the sort of levels of barium I'm seeing in the body. I don't know for sure, but I am very mindful that you can get barium in chemtrails, but no, there is no such thing as organic anymore. As I say, we are all poisoned, and all we can do is our very best to try to keep the load in our bodies as low as is possible through avoidance and detox regimes, because the body can tolerate quite a lot of toxic stress. It's just when it becomes overwhelming that we run into clinical problems.
Yes, I actually suffer from government intolerance. I find if you see a politician come on there on the well, I don't have a television. I don't even listen to the radio. I feel like throwing a brick at the screen. So I think that's government intolerance. It makes me feel very upset in the stomach. Now Exo's come up with an interesting one. Are parasites? Oh, same subject. Governments and parasites. Are parasites in the human body, pardon me, as much of a threat as some clickbaiting YouTube health podcasters claim?
Okay. Well, it depends what you mean by parasites.
Pardon me.
And how you define them. Um, it's unusual for me to see worms appear in stool samples, and the usual test for done that is a PCR test, which is a very sensitive test. So I don't think that parasites in the terms of worms are very common. If you mean parasites in the terms of microbes fermenting in the upper gut, then yes, that is very common. Bacteria and yeast readily ferment in the upper gut. And of course, they are parasitic. They're not doing any good for us whatsoever. I mean, there are bacteria in the large
Pardon
bowel,
me.
in the microbiome, which are helpful. They're symbiotic. But if we talk about parasites in the upper gut, then they are common. And we treat that, say, by starving that with a ketogenic diet and killing them with vitamin C and iodine. But I don't think parasites in terms of worms are that common.
Probably India they are, but places like that, tropics. Don't know.
I don't know. I have no experience. I would hate to
No,
say.
no. Well,
Although that does raise up a very interesting point, which is why do we see so much IgE, which is type 1 allergy in this country? And type 1 allergy is things like urticaria, hay fever,
I used to have that.
eczema. Okay, well, that's type 1 IgE allergy. And the question is, why do we have so much of it? And there's a very fascinating hypothesis, which is that we have the IgG immune system to deal with parasites, to deal with hookworms, tapeworms, roundworms, and the
Mm,
like. Now, of course, in the Western world, we don't have these worms. So the IgE system isn't occupied. It doesn't have a job to do anymore because we don't have that worm burden. In
mm.
Africa, where they do have a worm burden, those people who are atopic, who have a very active IgE system, have much less of a worm burden than otherwise. So you could argue that a few worms are a good thing to occupy our IgE system and maybe make hay fever and those sort of allergies less common. This is the work of Martin Church, who's an immunologist based down in Southampton. But it's theory, but it kind of stands up to scrutiny.
Well, when I was young, my parents used to take me out in the countryside. I lived in sort of like an urban, well, a sort of semi-urban place, but they used to take me in the countryside, think it's going to do me good. I was absolutely, eyes were streaming out, chronic hay fever, and it was really bad. Now, I might sneeze once. I don't
Hmm.
get fever.
Well,
That's
that's
really
that again. That's a really important observation
mm,
because obviously, as a young person, you were allergic and you were in an inflamed state. I was the same. As a child, I had allergies
yeah,
to horses, to dust, to dogs,
yeah.
and anaphylactic to wasp stings.
Asthma
Yeah, and
as well.
asthma and
Yeah.
rhinitis. But as I learned some of the causes, and as I put in place all things anti-inflammatory, which includes keto diet, avoiding grains and dairy, vitamin C, iodine, I've become much less allergic. So now I no longer get hay fever. I can ride, I can sit on a horse without sneezing and sneezing and sneezing. I can hold my dog without getting allergic urticaria up my arms and so on. And my guess is you too have put in place a
Mm.
less inflamed lifestyle and have been able to damp down this allergic tendency. And and that's very important because allergies can make you very miserable.
Well, please, could vegetarians and vegans please put your fingers in your ears now and not listen to this because I became a vegetarian once and said I don't want my stomach to be an animal graveyard. Then became vegan, and that lasted a very short time, and I've never felt so hungry.
Well, that is the problem. That's the problem
Yeah,
with
this was many
vegetarian.
years ago in when I was in my 30s. Yeah, sorry, you was going to say.
And I entirely understand why people go vegetarian and vegan because
Mm,
I share the animal welfare concerns of
mm,
vegetarians and vegans. I totally get it, but it's not an evolutionary correct diet, and vegetarian and vegan diets are nearly always high in carbohydrates and sugars, which drive all the pathologies that we've been talking about.
yeah.
Now, again, I know it's expensive, but if you can buy organic meat, organic food comes with welfare standards. You can't have the animals intensively reared. You've got to look after them properly as animals
Mm,
and make sure they have a nice life. And of course, I'm in a very privileged position. I've got some pigs in my shed at the back there. They graze. They get fat on about 7 acres of woodland. They're hogging back acorns as we speak, and they have a very good life.
yeah.
So I don't feel guilty about killing them, and I don't waste any of it. As they say about a pig, you can eat everything except the squeak. So there's nothing is
Mm.
wasted when I eat that pork. And if you respect those animals and you give them a good life, then I think one is justified in giving them a good life and then taking life.
Well, the thing is, if it's done quick and efficiently, they don't know anything about it. There's 1 minute they're eating, the next minute they're handing in their dinner jacket, and that's it. Bingo. But
Correct.
the thing, what's your view of honey? You see, I know that there's sugar, but then you got natural honey.
Well,
Uh, that's an
honey,
interesting one.
I
I'm
know, but
fascinated with
honey,
this one.
honey is sugar. And again, it fails my addiction test. And if I have, 1 teaspoon of
Mm,
honey, I want another one and another one
mm,
and another one.
I'm
So
saying.
now, of course, honey, would have been consumed, over the last few hundreds of thousands of
Mm,
years, but it was an occasional treat. Once a year, twice a year, the tribe would have discovered in a honey pot. They'd have all feasted on honey, had a wonderful time, and then that was it. It disappeared. and the body can perfectly well tolerate, a short window of high carb hit.
Mm,
And of course, that is entirely desirable, because if primitive man and primitive woman is to survive the winter, they've got to get fat in the autumn. And we get fat in the autumn because suddenly we have free food. There's a windfall, isn't there? The fruit
mm.
trees mature, the roots, the pulses, the seeds, the nuts, they're all there. And they're carbohydrates. They switch on the carbohydrate addiction gene. We eat them in an addictive way and we get fat. And that is survival value for the winter. And of course, that includes honey. But those foods dry up because we primitive man, primitive woman didn't have the deep freezers, didn't have the storage supply. They survived the winter on their fat stores, plus the occasional hunt. So and they went into hibernation. And even now today, we still go into slight hibernation.
Mm.
When it gets dark. I sleep much longer in the winter than I do in the
I
summer,
do.
for example.
I do.
We cool down, our body temperature is less. We don't need to eat so much food. We tend to put on weight in the autumn. These are all evolutionary assets that still prevail today.
Well,
But
that's right.
mm,
It's all carry on. Sorry.
so honey for the very occasional feast is fine, but not as a regular staple food.
That's because what I do if I cut myself, which I'm always doing accidentally, I put a bit of honey sometimes on the cut and then bind it up.
It's a great way of sterilising wound, but I can tell you iodine
Yeah.
is much better.
Really? That's interesting. Very interesting. What do you think of cayenne pepper? So but it clots the blood a little bit easier. It heals the
Well,
wound quickly.
it's jolly good stuff. And
Yeah.
if you look at life from the point of view of a plant, herb, a spice, a seed, or whatever, it doesn't want to be eaten. It doesn't want to be eaten by a bacteria or a yeast or a virus. So all vegetable foods, nuts, seeds, roots, grains, a lot, all make themselves as poisonous as possible. And many of those poisons have antimicrobial activity, and they can be used in the body as antimicrobials. So, various herbs are helpful to treat the upper fermenting gut, to treat infection, to thin the blood, or whatever. And cayenne pepper is one such. So this is why herbalists can be very useful people, and herbs can be used to
Mm.
great advantage to enhance, our health. But it all starts with diet and what we eat. And as I say, I can't say it often enough, and you'll all be bored of me, but it's sugars and carbohydrates that feed pathology, and that's the thing that we should be avoiding.
Excellent. And now Alice Gorgeous said, "Iodine cured my Derbyshire neck." Yeah, because people used to get goiters, didn't they? Last year, my neck was swollen. Apparently, it's due to the depleted soil food of nutriments.
Well, in
Mm,
particular, iodine,
mm.
and iodine deficiency is pretty much pandemic. If you're not taking an iodine supplement, I can almost guarantee you will be deficient. And I never bother to measure levels of iodine because I know what the answer is going to be. You're going to be deficient. And my view is we should all be taking an iodine supplement for a multiplicity of reasons. And a very desirable dose is Lugol's iodine, 3 drops once a day. The key with remember that iodine is
Mm.
iodine and vitamin C knock each other out. One's a reducing agent, the other's an oxidizing agent. One's an electron donor, one's an electron receiver. I can never remember which way round it is, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to remember. All you need to know is don't take them at the same time. So I tend to take iodine in the morning, vitamin C at night.
Interesting. That's great. Now the other one is Alice Gorgeous says, "How many months of no monthlies is classed as menopause, please? It's been 4 months, not pregnant or bragging."
Well, it's all about definition. And the usual definition of the menopause is if you've not seen a period for 2 years, then you're definitely through the menopause. But if you're not sure, then a simple blood test will give you an idea. And if the FSH and the LH is in the sky, then you're probably menopausal. The average age is about 50, 51, something like that. It tends to run in families. So if your mother went through the menopause in her 40s, then it's more likely that you will too. Some women run on seeing periods until they're 53 or 54, but that's unusual.
Now, reconciliation. That's Patrick, who is in Wisconsin in America. Says, ask what you know about what's this?
Sister seal.
I
Sister
can't
seal.
even pronounce it.
Okay.
Sister still.
Okay. Essentially, it's when the urethra prolapses down through the anterior wall of the vagina. And my guess is that much of this is due to poor obstetric practice. Now, it's a very dear friend of mine called Martin Quinn, who's a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist, who's written a fabulous book about this. It's not been published yet. I'm trying to persuade him to get on and publish it. But women's labours and also their bowels are often poorly managed. So his rule is that a labour, when women in labour having a baby, the first phase, which is when we get in contractions, should not last more than 12 hours. And if it does, cesarean section. The second phase of pushing should not last more than an hour. If not, then should be a cesarean section. Because if you don't, if you let women labour far too long, you massively damage the nerves that supply the cervix and the upper vagina, and you damage the ligaments and the muscles of the pelvic floor. And that results in problems like cystocele, like prolapse, and chronic pelvic pain, vulvodynia, pain with intercourse, and so on. So, an awful lot of women's gynecological problems result from poor practice, poor gynecological practice. D&Cs, which are pretty barbaric operations, I have to say, termination of pregnancies, operations for ectopic pregnancies, or whatever. Yes, it's got to be done, but there's potential for damage here, which in the long term can cause many problems. So, cystoceles are difficult. It's all about prevention, but of course, by the time you got on, it's too late to do that. Strengthening the muscles of the pelvic floor may help, but only too often women have to end up having surgery.
Yes. Why are gynecologists mainly men? I've often wondered that. That's a question I've always wanted to ask. Why are they mainly men? This is
Don't know.
you wonder. Now, Exo says my partner developed allergic asthma late in life, but it seems hugely histamine based on all fronts.
Okay.
Has an increase in this been seen, and what are possible causes?
Okay. Well, histamine is not the cause. Histamine is just the messenger. We have to ask what's releasing the histamine, and it's nearly always allergy. And the commonest groups of allergen will either be allergies to food, and again, it's the usual offenders, it's grains, it's dairy products, it's yeast, or it's allergy to microbes from the upper fermenting gut. Now, we've touched on the upper fermenting gut. It occurs when we have too many sugars and carbohydrates. But one of the problems is that those microbes that are fermenting can get from the gut into the bloodstream, where they get stuck at distal sites and drive pathology there. So if these microbes get stuck in the joints, they will drive arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, Reiter syndrome, psoriatic arthritis. If they get stuck in the muscles, they can drive fibromyalgia. If they get stuck in the lungs, they can drive so-called intrinsic asthma or late onset asthma. So your partner EXO needs to do at least a paleo ketogenic diet, maybe even a carnivore diet. And in addition to that, put in place all things anti-inflammatory: vitamin C, iodine, vitamin D, good quality sleep, and etc., etc., etc. And there's a good chance then that we damp down. And in addition to that, as we've spoken earlier, sniff iodine, because iodine is anti-infection and anti-allergy. So again, that will massively reduce any inflammation or infection that may be in the lungs that's driving this whole process.
How long does that iodine and salt last in the salt one that you
Well, the salt
smell?
lasts forever. Salt lasts forever. The iodine is volatile, but if you can smell it, it's still there. So if you charge
Mm.
it up in the morning, it'll probably still be smellable by the evening. If it isn't, just put another couple of drops of iodine in.
So you leave the salt there as long as you want, I suppose, and just
Yeah, it's just a delivery mechanism. That's all. I
ah,
mean, this is ancient. You can see the inside is stained slightly. Well, you probably can't see that,
yeah,
stained slightly yellow from the iodine.
I can see
But
that. Yeah.
this is years old, but it's still got plenty of salt in there. Doing it's
Ah,
just a delivery mechanism. That's all.
That's interesting because there was a chappie who was put in jail in Iraq, I believe it was, and he was a doctor, and he didn't have anything to help people with except salt. And they found out he was innocent in the end, and he went back into the jail voluntarily to help the prisoners.
Oh,
And
bless him.
he wrote a book on salt and how marvellous it is. But I'm not talking about the table salt that you buy down the road in the supermarket. I'm talking about proper sea salt and things like that. And I've noticed because excuse me showing off, but I go to posh shops like Pound Shop, and things like that, and they're actually selling Himalayan rock salt in there. I just wonder if it is.
Well, I mean, it's not that's better than table salt, but
Yeah.
I actually make up my own salt, which I call sunshine salt, and the
Oh.
reason I do that is because I couldn't find a multi mineral on the market that contained all the minerals that I wanted to see in decent doses, in a form that's soluble, and in the correct proportion. So I made up my own salt, which is essentially it's 80% Celtic sea salt, so it tastes delicious, but it's got a dollop of potassium, magnesium, and a bit of calcium. But most importantly, it's got all essential trace elements in decent doses. So it's got zinc, copper, selenium, chromium, molybdenum, iodine. A big dose of B12. It's got cobalt in it. A big dose of vitamin D. So it's got the whole shooting match in there. And of course, it's delicious. You can put it on your food. You can make sure the rest of the family get a decent dose of minerals, and it's very inexpensive for what it is.
Yeah.
So my patients love that,
Marvelous.
and that goes down very well.
Well, I've got a story about there was I worked in an office. Strangely enough, I worked down in Longacre in London at one time, in the same office building as Yogi Bear did the first television transmission. And there was a chap who had absolute chronic asthma, and we're all freelance, so we're all paid by the hour. And he would sort of walk in, and he had a machine. I was thinking, he's not going to make the weekend. And there's a chap there who was married to an Oriental lady, and he said, "Look, why don't you go to the Chinese doctor that she goes to in Chinatown, because it's just around the corner to Longacre." Well, this chap was so bad that it took two fellas to actually lift him up and put him in the taxi. He just about made it into work. And this was on the Friday, and on the Monday morning, we thought, oh well, he really looked next to death's door. Door came flying open. He punched the air. Said, "Hello, fellas!" And apparently, the Chinese doctor, she said, "I'm afraid your NHS doctor is killing you." She gave him some herbs, and he just recovered.
Well,
Quite amazing.
I know, but see, also we have to ask the question why. And
Yeah.
most asthma drugs don't do that. They're bronchodilators, or they're steroids. They're not looking at root causes. So of course,
Mm,
if you don't address the underlying cause, you're never going to cure it. You're just going to go
precisely.
downhill. And that's the problem with symptom suppressing drugs. We have symptoms for very good
Mm,
reasons. Symptoms are our body's way of saying there's something wrong. Do something different. Try and change. And if
yeah,
you don't do something different, try and change. If you just suppress symptoms, it'll just get worse and worse and worse. So this is why Western medicine is in such a parlous state at the moment, because that's what
that's
drugs
very
are
true.
doing.
Well, I live in a cul-de-sac, and I often see people driving back from the chemist shop with their NHS goodie bags of toxins. And when you look around this cul-de-sac, there's about 12 properties there, 12, 13 properties. And um, there's a couple of people that are obese. I would say that 50% are on ongoing medications. And let's face it, if Big Pharma was so successful, why do they have repeat prescriptions? Surely
Well,
you'd be cured.
that's because big pharma is so successful, not because they cure people, but because they make loads of money. And
Precisely.
their responsibility is not to patients, it's to their shareholders. As I say, big pharma acts in a psychopathic way. They
Mm.
act with a callous disregard for those people who are receiving their medications and their drugs, and but they make loads of money for themselves. They are completely selfish institutions, and it's
Yeah,
just astonishing that the doctors have allowed themselves to be brainwashed as they have been. It really is a national disgrace.
it is. Now, I don't know if this is a comic one or not. This is Nathan. I know him. He's often on the show. Nathan Lucius says, "I'm allergic to my girlfriend's dogs." Any ideas? Yes, there was a dog once. A girlfriend of mine. Her dog was allergic to me. Used to bite me, but no.
Well, I mean, yeah, dogs, they're all slightly different. They have slightly different antigens. Funnily enough, I had one patient who was really wanted to get a dog and managed to find a hairless dog, a bald dog, but she was allergic to that as well because the allergen is in the horse, it is in the dog's sweat that comes out through their skin and onto their fur. So it's, I mean, if you're allergic, that would be difficult. You're allergic to your girlfriend's dogs. Just washing the dog would be helpful, but my little dog hates being washed and wouldn't appreciate that at all. So it depends in what way you're allergic, Nathan. If it's asthma, then sniffing iodine before, during, and after might be very helpful. If it's that you're contact sensitive on your skin, then obviously try to avoid contact. But again, iodine on the skin is quite helpful at damping down allergic rashes. Or, take antihistamines. I know it's not ideal, but it's just a temporary block whilst you're in the location of your girlfriend's dogs.
Well, actually, Paul's got the best idea. I think. Try spending time with your girlfriend instead of the dog.
I wish I'd thought of that.
Yeah. And Alice Gill just said, give her an automation. Automation, Nathan. Yes, that's a good idea. Aunt Sally says, if this is coming up, come on.
Just one thing. I'm not sure how long we're speaking for, but I've got to go out and sort my pigs out this evening, and it's already well
It's
past my
okay.
bedtime. So
Oh,
I'm
I
done an
understand.
hour
Don't
and
worry.
40 minutes.
Okay, well, we wind up when you feel it's right to wind up. Don't worry, because we what we do with the show lasts as long as a piece of string. That's how long the show
Okay, well,
is.
I'm running out of steam because I've got a lot of work to do before I can get to
I
bed.
understand.
I'm an early to
Well,
bedder.
Aunt Sally said, I believe they used to wipe clean out the bread ovens with iodine. We would have consumed it in the crusts of the next batch in previous times.
That would have been a
So,
very desirable state of affairs.
yes, and sea moss contains iodine. Yes.
Not much.
Now, Exo says about leaky gut syndrome. And is that leaky gut syndrome? Well, I believe, am I right in saying that tomatoes are not really good for you because the seeds create leaky
Yeah,
gut? So I
leaky
heard.
gut nearly always arises from inflammation of the gut. If the gut lining is inflamed, it will be leaky. Now, the gut lining can be inflamed because you're allergic to something. And again, it's the old story, it's gluten, grains, dairy, and yeast that come up. Or it can be leaky because you've got an upper fermenting gut, because
Mm.
those microbes live on the lining of the gut wall. They might be bacteria and they might be yeast. And as they live there, you get low grade inflammation, and that causes leaky gut. And yes, leaky gut, as we've discussed, drives much pathology.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. It's been fantastic. And you've got an open invite to come on anytime you want because it really has been great. And we've learnt a lot tonight. I hope you don't mind going backwards and forwards into chat, but it's sort of, it's like a big happy family here, and and I think that it makes it builds up. But thank you so much for so much information and
My
common
pleasure.
sense about medicine. And it just leaves me to say thank you very much, everybody, for coming on the show tonight. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and also visit Dr. Myhill's website, which is along the bottom here. She's got a shop as well, so that's it. You've written loads of books, haven't you, on the subject? So interesting books, everything you need to know. And as I say, there's an open microphone here. So if ever you want to come on, as I say, please say. And it just leaves me to say, whatever happens, have a bloody good laugh and good
I'll second that. I could just finish off with one joke.
certainly. Oh,
It's
please
not
do. Yeah, we start with a joke generally, but
it's not a
yeah,
very politically correct joke, but
yes.
that's my style. And this pertains to the next James Bond movie that's coming out. And in response to the woke brigade and the pressures of such, Bond
Mm.
is going to start the film off as a man And as the film progresses, you're going to finish off as a woman. And the
Oh, no.
film's going to be called Cock to Pussy.
Oh, that's a classic, that one is. Sorry, get me funny bone. Well, I was gonna say humour is the best medicine unless you've got diarrhea, but I mean, that's another thing. Well, thank you very much for coming on. As I say, I
Okay.
usually start the show with a gag. You've ended the show with a gag. That's terrific. So anyway, thank you very much, and as I
Okay.
say, and I'll be on the Paul English show this Thursday. And are you on any shows in the future that you would like to promote?
Oh, crumbs. I mean, there's a list of all the podcasts I do on my website. So I'm
Oh,
on
excellent.
various different shows, and the shameful thing is I don't remember them all. But if anybody wants to hear me, then if you go to my website, there's a list, and there's me on all sorts of subjects, whether it's keto diet or fatigue syndromes or cancer or whatever. Take your pick.
That's great. Thank you very much, and good night.
Okay. Bye for now, then.